I'm Colin Hoffman. Today on The Sociologist, we're talking about a case study about political fatigue and stress and balancing that with political engagement. This was a case study Son and I did in a science communication and environmental class entitled Political Fatigue in a Political World. So politics is something that touches everything in our lives, whether we like it or not, with our racial identity, our political alignment, our work, our marriages, the way we raise children, education, our access to information and everything like that. Politics touches everything in our life, and so it is a contact sport. And this is something I was doing a lot of research on up to the 2024 November 5th election, and now we have a lot of good information as well for dealing in a world after that election, particularly if there are people that had voted Democrat for Kamala Harris that may be feeling a sense of reticence and defeatism in the wake of that. So we also have a lot of great research to be able to share about political environments and how to communicate those in our world. There's a preponderance of social evidence for political stress. This is seen in surveys and polls that many people view politics as something stressful, something to be avoided, and show an aversion to politics in general. There's also this growing sense of distrust in institutions. People don't trust the cops, people don't trust the schools, people don't trust the healthcare systems, people don't trust the politicians at large. This is a global phenomenon currently right now in sociology that we are able to track. And there is this taboo, particularly in America, of politics, sex, and religion. Don't talk about it. Those are the things we don't talk about at the dinner table, at holiday parties and stuff like that. This unfamiliarity has led to an increased danger with these. Scissors are not dangerous in the hands of somebody that knows how to use them. Kitchen knives are not dangerous with somebody familiar with how to use them. However, when we've gone so many decades of these things being taboo, being in the dark, not safe to speak about with friends, with family, with coworkers, with loved ones, they become unfamiliar, and we tend to transpose this into a higher sense of stress when someone is running around with bare politics in their hand at the Thanksgiving dinner table. Don't bring that up. Uncle Jeremy's gonna lose his mind. So in this moment in time, this is between the November 5th election and January 20th, the inauguration of the incumbent president-elect Donald Trump. And this is a presidential election where a lot of people are experiencing adverse outcomes. They did not want this. They did not vote this. Particularly in America, there's a fetishization of democracy in where you can vote for whoever you like. That is different than being able to get whoever you like as president. Any election that we have had in anyone's living memory, there's been a lot of unhappy people with that. This is similar to sports psychology. Every time somebody wins, there's just as many losers in that stadium, on that team, in that ring, whatever it may be. So dealing with loss is something that we can transpose to political science as well. So some of these social causal attributions may be fallacious in nature because even before the November 5th election, these people, their values, their worldviews had been the same before anyone had cast a vote. This is not something that changes the social landscape before or after November 5th. So perception does drive reality. In political science, this is something we call phenomenology, the study of experience and perception of the world. Now, this is just as fallible as any human experiencing perception. There is studies and polls and a general malaise among people that politics has never been this bad. That is a recency bias. That is an optimism bias that we are somehow exceptional in the history of the world. An example I like to often bring up is that not that many years ago, we had separate drinking fountains in this country. With these perceptions, somebody that perceives themselves to be in danger will act out in self-defense with their vote, with their physical being, cutting off family members or taking up arms and moving out of the country, things like that, moving to a different state. This is something that we see anecdotally in social media, and it does get amplified by a media bell curve. Most humans fall within the bulge of a bell curve of statistics. However, when media and journalism sees one crazy person with a sign that says, "What?" at a protest, they will get a lot of the coverage versus the 99% of people that are more reasonable, that are more rational, that are relatively closer to us. So this kind of valence and distortion in media circles also leads to a distortion of our political worldviews as well, something to be aware of when we're perceiving the political world around us. In addition to some of these, recency bias and the subjectivity of our own personal worldviews distorting the ontology of what the world truly is around us in these political environments, there is also sampling bias, which is readily accessible through not just the internet, but real world experiences as well. The media choices you follow, the hashtags you happen to be, the voices that you follow in online spaces can distort the perception of the world around us just as much as if you only got your news from your crazy uncle, or if you only got your news from talking at the water cooler at work, or if you only got your news from legacy media like newspapers or your local news channel. All of those will change our perceptions of the world around us because bias and fallibility is inherent to the human engine, whether it is online or in person as well. People's worldviews and beliefs and value systems have been shaped by decades of living their life and having particular experiences building these values and beliefs. That will not change on a dime, no matter how roasty and fire your tweet is. Changing someone's mind is very, very difficult to do. And in discourse and in debate, particularly in online, if we ever scroll down into the comment sections, we see that it is quite difficult to ever change the momentum of what is driving a person and their identity. In a lot of this research as well, something I was able to find that 2 to 5 people out of 10 in every room you're in voted differently than you. 1 in 5 at a minimum. Los Angeles County in 2024 voted for Donald Trump by a margin of 20%. LA County, typically to be thought, one of the most liberal bastions of political thinking in the world. As an aside, I also happened to look at a county up in northern Wyoming called Washakie County, very rural, very ranch farm. I have family up there. They only had about 1,900 people that even turned out to vote. They voted 20% for Kamala Harris. So every room you're in that has 5 people, at least one of them voted differently than you did. Potentially up to 60% of them voted differently than you did. This is something that doesn't happen every 4 years. These are the people we are in rooms with, in comment sections with, in interactivity with, all year round, perennially. Keeping this in mind on how many people would vote differently than us or the same as us may lead to some consonance and some grounding in the way we present ourselves and the way we think about others and the way they may have voted. The 2 constancies in human history have been cooperation and conflict. We can't point to a time in history when conflict was not present. However, we also have the nobility of our cooperation. Our cooperation and communication is what had led us to become the apex species on this planet as well. Even politically, we had shown in 2023, there was a poll that 87% of Americans would prefer cooperation over vitriol, over aggression, and over conflict with that. So many people are very tired of this wave and perception of conflict with one another, rather finding common ground, rather finding steps forward, rather than left and right. Let's go move forward. Neurologically as well, I had found in a couple neuropolitical studies that there are different and just as imperative brain structures in trying to find cooperation and empathy with one another, as well as identifying threats to the social standing and social grouping. So some of the heuristics, these rules of thumb that we socially sort people into political parties, or by their accent, by their manner of dress, by their skin color, lead to stereotypes, monoliths, discrimination, and persecution systemically by how we decide to group people. Putting people into a label dehumanizes them, detaches them from their identity and from their being, makes it easier to visit aggression upon them. Face-to-face interactions, it's much harder to visit aggression, violence, and dehumanizing people, breaking people down to simply a political party or simply their race, simply a gender. When we are face to face with people, it's much harder for us to be violent because humans have this innate draw towards cooperating, towards communing, towards being able to help one another up through community. So one of my favorite authors is Lee McIntyre, who studies science denialism as well as conspiracy theories about science denialism. And something that he had noted in his studies is that if you joke about somebody's beliefs, no matter how extreme they may be, that will not entrench them nor alienate them from you. So if you can feel free to joke about, tastefully actually joke about, not making fun of people's beliefs, their labels, their political parties, anything not the person themselves, without worry that it will drive somebody further into that. Along with humor, though, I would like to say on the other side of that, satire, particularly conveyed online, has a danger of becoming misinformation because other people unfamiliar with the context may take that as straight talk, may take that as somebody being serious and genuine with that. Social media algorithms are driven by what we call valence. This is a psychological valence. This is a term of value. How do you value something? Do you comment on it? Do you like it? Do you view it? No matter of whether you like it, whether you agree with it or not, this is engagement. How likely are you to engage with something? Many of us would choose to engage with things that we disagree with. This drives some of these cycles of being stuck in vitriolic spaces and being suggested more politically engaging and raging content for us to view with, because a lot of these algorithms base off of how often or how more likely are you to pick a fight with somebody. And that's something to keep in mind, particularly when navigating online spaces. One prescription of this from a professor in Michigan of political science was to prescriptively engage in disengagement, creating a completely different online account specifically for puppies, kittens, Warhammer 40K, whatever it may be that is not politics, and very particularly curated to not have those in its algorithm, is one way of politically disengaging or going offline, taking a hike, taking a walk, going and enjoying time with family, animals, the world at large anyway. These are all healthy manners of disengaging that studies have shown. Also, people that had adverse outcomes after an election experience higher life satisfaction when they disengage politically and take a break from it. One of the projects I was very excited to do in this series was differences in brain structure. We have neuropolitical brain studies where we've used functional MRIs to analyze the brains of self-reported liberals as well as conservatives. So now in liberal brains, we were able to observe more developed left insula and anterior cingulate cortex. These are the brain structures that allow us to imagine pain outside of the self and be able to confer that to other people outside the self. What this kind of translates to is being able to imagine the suffering of others. Can you imagine being an immigrant in this country and being treated that way? Can you imagine being marginalized? Can you imagine having your rights taken away as this? This is one expression of political empathy. It could be interpreted as. Now, self-reported conservatives have more developed right amygdala and the anterior insula. These are the brain structures that imagine emotional stimulus outside the self. So how does the outside world make me feel? And also social sorting. Is this person in my group? What group is that person in? Do they belong? Do they wish me harm? Are they one of us? Are they not with us? So this also illustrates kind of the other side of empathy on being able to sort. If somebody is of my group, I can imagine their emotional state. If they are not considered my group, not sorted into my identity, it is much harder to associate with them. They are two different flavors of world engagement between these, again, self-identified political alignments. So these structures I was able to do a video on. I was very excited about these brain structures. They are not prescriptive of nature versus nurture, because as we exercise these parts of the brain, they grow and they develop more. So it's impossible to tell if somebody was born with them or if they developed one of these brain structures more in depth because they were in that political environment. We won't know the nature versus nurture of that because it is subject to change. It's like somebody with large biceps. Were they born that way, or is it because they were spending time in a gym and benching that? And so that's something to be careful of with these neuropolitical studies. And these differences highlight the necessity of both. Using these examples, liberals would be more apt to donate to the needy. Conservatives would be more apt to be able to pick out who's scamming you, who is a threat, what kind of behavior is not aligned in those patterns. So both of these are subject to the human condition, and both of them are necessary for pro-social social function. Now, politically within these environments, these structures and these scans are able to help us target specific voting groups. If you're trying to communicate to Democrats a particular message, we can use this kind of information on being able to imagine the empathy and imagine the pain of others with our targeted media. Along with that, the motivations to a conservative audience would be different on, hey, how can we sort these people and identify them as us? How can we make sure to include them? Things like that. So this is absolutely great information, and it also establishes code switching communication in our interpersonal things. If you have that uncle at Thanksgiving that you know voted differently than you, if you have coworkers that you know voted differently than you did, if you are in online spaces, this can help being able to target motivations and rewards in different groups and being able to understand their value languages a lot better, to empathize and understand the communication. We also have a lot of great data on the act of voting itself. So some of the details that I had come across this year were that voting in person correlated with higher cortisol levels, higher stress basically, than voting and dropping off a ballot or voting by mail-in ballot. People with higher stress around a particular election have demonstrated more acute, accurate memory 6 months later down the road on what the race was like, who they voted for, what the political world was like. So higher stress does burn it into your memory a little bit more. One of the things also that we came across was if you did vote and you had an adverse outcome, if you did vote and your side lost anyway, there is higher satisfaction in that. So even if you lose, if you go and vote, you put a little skin in the political game anyway, that is a soothing technique and makes you feel like I did what I could anyway. The Six Americas concept in environmentalism can be seen in these political actions, particularly when we have up to 25% of the voting population that is utterly disengaged, and those can be disengaged, dismissive, and doubtful voters that are a large block of who make up the world that we walk around in. 25%, 1 in 4 people don't see it as an onus, a call to action. So this is also absolutely great information about the act of voting, and potentially could be utilized to drive voter engagement in the future as well. Now, post-election, dealing with any election after the fact, again, goes to these notions of every election is going to have a winner and a loser. The more tightly somebody identifies their personal identity with a political party, you're going to be losing a good chunk of the time. The bipartisan duality in America leads so that there's often a flip-flopping effect with this. You will not be, batting hundreds, taking 0 L's your entire political life if you identify strongly with one political party or the other. This feeling of loss then confers onto the voter, onto yourself, and leads to these feelings of I'm a loser, I am dejected, we lost. So one of the psychological prescriptions of this is divorcing and developing a more robust sense of identity outside just the political party. I am a crochet enthusiast. I am a Disney adult. I am a volunteer. I am a farmer. I am a rancher. I am a craftsman. Whatever it may be. driving a more complete taxonomy of the identity of who you are, having more of these dots to connect in ourselves, recognizing that other people have more dots within these past just their political party, past their political identity, is a great way of driving more communication, more community in our political workings in the day-to-day. One of the other things in this space of time between November 5th and January 20th in a presidential election year would be what we call anticipatory prescriptive behaviors. These are anticipating something in the future and telling other people what to do about it, how to brace for that, what to prepare for, doomsday prepping, catastrophizing. What's the absolute worst that can happen? I would not want to caution anybody away from these kinds of behaviors. It is self-soothing to a degree. It is building consonance, reducing cognitive dissonance, and things like that. However, it is important to keep in mind that prescribing behaviors for the future doesn't always go that way, particularly politically. I would like to offer the evidence that in the very recent past, just since the year 2000, we lived through 8 years of a Bush administration. We also lived through 8 years of an Obama administration. No matter what people thought that person was going to end the country, we also made it through 4 years of a Trump administration. We also made it through 4 years of a Biden administration. No matter what the prescriptions of the adverse people on the losing side of those elections saying the world is going to end, it's going to be the worst thing ever, the country's not going to exist anymore, we have made it pretty evenly in the last 25 years of this flip-flopping behavior. We ain't dead yet.